The demon hovered half a meter from the 5-year-old's face. Raindrops hung in the air like glass beads. All of Seoul froze mid-scream. And only one person, with the word error above his head, blinked and flicked his finger at a frozen raindrop. Let's rewind 3 minutes. The ring falls into the latte, and splashes of vanilla syrup burn Han Do-yeon's wrist. So-eun doesn't even look him in the eye. She stares intently at Che Ji-hoon, and her fingers are already resting on his forearm so naturally that Do-yeon understands everything. Not now. Long ago. At this very moment, the sky above the university square cracks like the screen of a cheap phone. Blue translucent panels unfold above the heads of thousands of people. System interface. Every person on the planet is assigned a class and rank. Do-yeon sees Eun-hae's panel. Class, Saint. Potential, S. He sees Ji-hoon's panel. Class, Hero. Potential, S. And then he looks down at her own and reads what everyone around her sees. Han Do-yeon. Class, Unidentified. Status, Error. Time, Null. Broken symbols instead of numbers. Emptiness instead of a class. The silence lasts exactly 3 seconds. Then Eun-hae takes off her ring. She throws it into a cup. She says a saint cannot be near a system error, that it contradicts the will of heaven. She says this in a voice that reads a pre-rehearsed script. Ji-hoon places his hand on her lower back with a masterful gesture, and he turns to Do-yeon with that smile he's known since childhood. With that smile, Ji-hoon used to take other kids' toys in the sandbox and other kids' lunches in the cafeteria. He says Do-yeon shouldn't hold a grudge. After all, he's not even a player. The crowd laughs. Someone whips out a phone and starts filming. The guy with the error sign stands there with a wet wrist while his fiancée walks off arm in arm with his best friend, who has a golden SS glowing above his head. Great content. Warm coffee runs down Do-yeon's fingers. He doesn't clench the cup. He doesn't throw it. He doesn't run after them. He watches as Ji-hoon leads Eun-hae to a black SUV with an emblem on the door. A golden cross against the backdrop of the rising sun. The Order of Ascension. The car is already waiting. The car is ready. So Ji-hoon knew in advance. So someone whispered to him what grade he would get. So the ring in the latte wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing, but a plan. And this is where the strangest part begins. A meteor the size of a 9-story building hovers in the sky above Seoul. It doesn't fall. It just hangs there. Demons pour out of rifts in the air like black snow. One leaps toward the playground across the street. A 5-year-old child freezes with his mouth open. The demon hovers half a meter from his face, claws extended. People scream and run, but their screams trail off mid-word. Bodies freeze in absurd poses. Cars stall. Birds hang in midair. Raindrops freeze like glass beads. The world has frozen. The whole world except for one person. Do-yeon blinks. She looks at the frozen drop in front of her nose. She flicks it with her finger. The drop flies off and hovers in a new spot. He shifts his gaze to Eun-hae's frozen face through the rear window, to her rehearsed grimace of regret, to Ji-hoon behind the wheel with the hero's golden panel, to the child, to the demon half a meter from the child, at the meteorite over the city, at his own panel. Error, time null, and Do-yeon drops a single phrase into the absolute silence of the frozen world. Nothing. I have time. He finishes his latte. The ring clinks against his teeth. He pulls it out and hides it in his breast pocket. He approaches the frozen demon near the playground. A creature the size of a large dog. Black scales, yellow glass eyes. The panel above it shows an F rank. Do-yeon doesn't know what to do with the demon. He knows absolutely nothing about this new world. But he knows one thing. He has enough time. He turns and walks down the street past frozen people and stalled cars, past suspended shards and drops of blood, past bodies that will be dead a second after thawing, past demons that will start killing a second later. Seoul stands like a photograph of hell a moment before the flash, and Do-yeon walks through this photograph alone, with an empty cup in his hand, with a ring in his pocket, with 100 years ahead of him. 3 blocks away, he finds a bookstore. The door is wide open. The owner is frozen behind the cash register with a coin between his fingers. Do-yeon walks in and pulls the first book he sees off the shelf, Anatomy. He sits on the floor between the shelves and opens the first page. If the world has decided he is a glitch in the system, he will become the kind of glitch that makes the system want to reboot. And he'll keep the latte cup. He already knows why he'll need it. He reads the first page in a minute, turns the page, reads the second. The words sink in and stay with him. He doesn't notice it right away. He finishes the chapter on the structure of the heart and closes the book, opens it again to a random page. He remembers every line, every diagram. He closes his eyes and sees the text so clearly, it's as if the page is hanging right in front of him. So this is how frozen time works. Memory doesn't fade. Fatigue doesn't set in. He isn't hungry. He doesn't want to sleep. His body has frozen along with the world, and only his mind moves. Do-yeon opens the second book, the third. By the end of the first hour, he devours the entire anatomy section on the shelf. By the end of the third, he moves on to the chemistry textbooks. He doesn't know how long an hour actually lasts in this frozen world. The clock on the wall has stopped. The phone shows the same time. Time null. He counts the pages he's read instead of minutes. By the 1,000th page, he realizes he doesn't feel the slightest bit of fatigue. By the 5,000th, he begins to suspect that this gift has no limit. Do-yeon leaves the store and walks on. The city awaits him, motionless and silent. He enters a pharmacy and reads the medication instructions. He walks into a gun shop, which is closed to the public, and flips through the catalogs. He enters the university library through a door held open by a security guard and gets stuck there for a long time. The shelves reach the ceiling. Thousands of books, tens of thousands. He sits down on the floor in the aisle between philosophy and physics and starts with the letter A. Days pass. Maybe weeks, maybe months. In a frozen world, time leaves no trace. His beard doesn't grow. His nails don't grow. His stomach doesn't growl. Do-yeon reads. He learns how muscles are built and how ligaments tear, how poison works and how an antidote is brewed, how gunpowder burns and how gas explodes. He memorizes the anatomy of every animal in the atlas and suspects that demons are built similarly. Where the creature's heart is, where the liver is, where the ligament is that can be severed with a single movement. He reads about human psychology, about how people lie and how they give themselves away with a twitch of the eyelid. He recalls Eun-hae's rehearsed voice. He recalls that her pupils didn't flicker, so she was preparing. So she was rehearsing. Do-yeon closes the psychology book and stares at the wall for a long time. Then he opens the next one. One day, he returns to the frozen demon near the playground. It still hangs half a meter from the child's face, its claws extended. Do-yeon circles the creature. He examines every scale. He pulls a knife from his pocket, one he'd bought at a hardware store. He touches the blade to the black hide. The blade doesn't penetrate. The hide is hard as stone. In this frozen world, the demon is invulnerable, just like everything else. It cannot be wounded. It cannot be moved more than a centimeter. Do-yeon flicked at raindrops and they flew away, but the demon feels different. The demon seems to have grown into the very fabric of frozen time. Do-yeon puts the knife away. He sits down opposite the creature, right on the asphalt, and looks into its yellow, glassy eyes. He can't kill the demon right now, but he can memorize it down to the last muscle. When time starts moving again, he'll have 1 second, and in that second, he must know where to strike. He takes out an anatomy atlas of predators and places it next to the creature. He compares. He searches for a vulnerable spot beneath the scales on its neck, where something under the skin. He maps out the strike in his mind, over and over. He rehearses the movement he will make in a split second. Hand to the sheath. A step forward, the blade under the scales, a twist of the wrist. He repeats this movement 1,000 times in the still air, 10,000 times. His muscles don't tire because in a frozen world there is no fatigue, but the body's memory accumulates. Do-yeon feels the movement becoming his own. The knife fits into his palm as if it had always been there. He walks away from the demon and goes to find the next one. Hundreds of creatures hover all over Seoul, each one a mystery, each one a lesson. Do-yeon selects them like pages in a textbook. He studies the structure of the wings of a flying demon above the roof of a bank. He studies the jaws of the creature that has sunk its teeth into the bus door and frozen in mid-motion. He is in no hurry. He has more time than any living person on this planet. Some received the class of saint, some hero, but he received time. And now he understands why the system called it an error, because time isn't an ability. Time is everything. Do-yeon returns to the coffee shop where it all began, the table where Eun-hae had been sitting. A puddle of spilled latte on the floor has frozen into a shiny stain. He looks at the spot where she dropped the ring. He takes the ring out of his pocket, a simple silver band he'd saved up for 3 months from part-time jobs. He twirls it between his fingers, then puts it back, doesn't throw it away. Do-yeon leaves and heads to the Order of Ascension. He found the address in the library in a binder of newspapers sitting on the counter. The Order of Ascension, a religious political organization that has bought up half of Seoul's business districts over the past year. Its emblem is a golden cross against the backdrop of a rising sun. The same people who took away Eun-hae and Ji-hoon the very first minute of the new world. The same people who knew about the system in advance. Do-yeon reaches their headquarters in an hour, a tall building made of black glass. Guards in uniform stand frozen at the entrance. Inside, people in white robes with golden crosses on their chests stand frozen. Do-yeon walks past them as if they were mannequins. He rides the motionless escalators. He enters the offices. He reads the documents left on the desks, and gradually the picture comes together. The Order had known about the system's arrival 3 years in advance. They had a prophet, or a device, or both. They knew in advance who would be assigned which class. They selected future heroes and saints while they were still children. They prepared them. They trained them. They took them to the right place at the right time. Cho Ji-hoon had been on their lists since he was 12. So Eun since she was 14. But Han Do-yeon wasn't on the lists at all, because the system couldn't read him, because he was a mistake even before he became a mistake. Do-yeon finds a folder marked Anomaly in the archives. Inside is a list of 7 names from around the world, people the system failed to classify. 6 names are crossed out in red with the note eliminated. The 7th name is his own, Han Do-yeon, not crossed out, not yet. He closes the folder and stands for a long time in the silence of the frozen archive. So the Order is hunting people like him. So 6 are already dead. So when time moves on, they'll come for him. Do-yeon puts the folder back exactly where it was. He doesn't want the Order to know he was here. Not now. First, he must become stronger. Much stronger. He goes downstairs and steps out of the black building onto the frozen street. The meteorite still hangs over the city. Demons still pour out of the fissures like black snow. Raindrops glisten in the air. Do-yeon looks at his panel. Error. Time null. And for the first time in all this time, he smiles. They called him a system error. They marked people like him in red. But they didn't take one thing into account. To fix an error, you have to catch it first. But how do you catch someone who has infinite time? Do-yeon returns to the library. He still has so much left to read. So many demons left unexplored. So many moves left unrehearsed. He sits on the floor between the shelves and opens the next book. Martial Arts. Chapter 1. Stance. He reads, and his body already knows it will repeat every movement 1,000 times in the still air of frozen soul. And somewhere out there, behind the thin veil of frozen time, So Eun-hae still wears her rehearsed grimace of regret. Ji-hoon still grips the steering wheel with the hero's golden fingers. The child still stares into the demon's yellow eyes. And none of them know that the world is no longer what it was 3 seconds ago, because the system error has gained time, and the error has begun to learn. The 30th day of the pause. Do-yeon had cut open the chest of the 27th demon that morning, and his hands no longer trembled. He'd cut open the first one with a kitchen knife from the restaurant on the corner of Chonno, and it took him 4 hours. The scales wouldn't give way. The knife broke. Do-yeon went to get another one. He broke that one too. He returned with an axe from the hardware store. The axe did the job, but Do-yeon realized he needed a system. Not the one hanging in the sky, but his own. During the first week, he read everything he could find on veterinary surgery and comparative anatomy. Demons turned out to be closer to reptiles than to mammals. A double circulatory system, a core in the area of a second heart shifted toward the spine. A small black crystal the size of a grape, pulsing even in frozen time. When Do-yeon excised the first nucleus from an F-rank demon, his panel flashed. The resonance changed from 0 to 73. He froze. For the first time ever, the dead error message flickered. He excised the second, 146. The third, 219. Each F-rank creature yielded between 50 and 80 units of resonance. Do-yeon sat down on the sidewalk among the 3 dissected demonic corpses and did the math in his head. In Seoul, at the moment of the freeze, he estimated that around 60,000 demons had materialized within the city limits alone. The overwhelming majority were F-rank. If each yields a minimum of 50 units, then 60,000 cores equal 3 million resonance units. In just one city. And there are thousands of cities on the planet. Do-yeon smiled. For the first time in 30 days, he realized that the entire frozen world was his pantry. Every creature hanging in the air was not a threat, but a resource waiting to be harvested. The living players had been given 1 class each and would fight over crumbs when time resumed. And he alone was traversing the frozen planet, harvesting a crop that no one but him could see. By the 14th day, he had mastered the dissection of an F-class demon down to its core in 11 minutes. By the 20th day, in 4 minutes. He made himself tools from surgical steel found in St. Peter's Hospital on the south side. A scalpel, a bone clamp, a dilator, modified for demonic anatomy. He laid them out on a rolled-up towel in order of size, like a surgeon before an operation. Every morning, he sharpened the blades on a whetstone until the edge could cut through a hair. He didn't need to hurry, but he did because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. How her fingers lay on Ji-hoon's forearm. How the car with the golden cross waited by the curb. How Ji-hoon said that Do-yeon wasn't even a player. How the crowd laughed. How someone raised a phone to film his humiliation. These images surfaced in his memory as clear as the pages of books he'd read. The gift of time wouldn't let him forget anything. Not the poison formula, nor the structure of the demon's heart, nor the face of the woman he loved, who had taken off her ring in 3 seconds. Do-yeon learned to use this memory as fuel. When his hands grew tired of cutting, he recalled the crowd's laughter, and his hands found strength. On the 15th day, he found a frozen demon of a higher rank, E rank, resonance 340. The creature was the size of a horse, with 6 limbs and armor made of bone plates. It had frozen the moment it landed on the roof of a bus full of people. A second after it thawed, everyone on that bus would be dead. Do-yeon climbed onto the roof. He looked through the glass at the faces of the people inside. A woman clutched her bag to her chest. An old man was reading a newspaper. A schoolgirl with headphones was staring at her phone. They didn't know. They had frozen a moment before death and had no idea. Do-yeon placed his palm on the glass above the schoolgirl's face. He couldn't save them. Not now. Their salvation depended on a single second and a single movement that he hadn't yet mastered quickly enough. He memorized the bus, memorized the route number, memorized the demon's posture and the angle at which it fell. When time starts moving again, he'll be the first to return here. He turned to face the demon. E rank required a different approach. A regular scalpel wouldn't pierce the bone armor. Do-yeon went down to the nearest hardware store and returned with an angle grinder, a cordless one. The battery lasted long enough. The disc screeched against the bone plate, and sparks froze in the air as orange dots that wouldn't fade. Do-yeon worked for an hour. Then another hour. The armor gave way layer by layer. The E-rank core turned out to be the size of a walnut and yielded 320 resonance units at a time. Do-yeon's panel updated. Resonance 4,200. Rank E. He stood on the roof of the bus with the core in his bloodied hand and the E-rank panel above his head. No one saw. No one knew. He was the sole witness to his own transformation. He tucked the core into his pocket with the rest and climbed down. Under his jacket, a small bag of black crystals was already jingling. He began to realize that cores could not only be absorbed, but also stored, that they were the currency of the new world, that whoever had hundreds of them would be richer than any hero. On the 20th day, he reached the gun shop. In fact, he'd known where it was from day one. He just hadn't been ready. Now he was. 14 types of firearms lay on the display stands like museum exhibits. Do-yeon picked up a pistol first, a Glock 17, standard issue. He'd never held a gun before. His fingers were unsteady and heavy. He emptied the magazine into the basement wall of the nearest building. The recoil struck his wrist. Of the 19 rounds, 3 hit the wall. Do-yeon reloaded and fired again. 4 hits. Again, 5. He fired for 6 hours straight until he ran out of ammunition in the entire store. Then he went to the next store. In the frozen world, a bullet would fly from the barrel and freeze in midair a meter away. Do-yeon walked along the line of frozen bullets and looked where they had landed. Spread, drift, elevation. He read his own shooting like a hidden book. No living shooter in the world could see his bullet in flight. But Do-yeon saw every one. Day 20, day 21. He switched from a pistol to a rifle. He memorized every model he found in gun catalogs. He disassembled and reassembled the bolt with his eyes closed 300 times. By the 30th day, Do-yeon was hitting 10 out of 10 from 30 meters with any short-barreled weapon. His wrists ached so much he couldn't clench his fist in the mornings, but he clenched it anyway. He turned the pain into a tool, too. The pain meant his body was changing, that the system's flaw was no longer helpless. Every morning he woke up in the back room of the bookstore where he'd made himself a bed. The first thing he did was open his eyes and look at the latte cup sitting on the shelf next to his pillow. The cup didn't spoil. In frozen time, nothing spoiled. The latte was still just as warm. The ring lay at the bottom. And every morning, Do-yeon said the same thing. It's still early today. He didn't even explain to himself why he kept the cup. But every morning, his hand reached out to check that it was still there, as if it were an anchor that held him in that second when everything collapsed and at the same time promised that the second would return. He would come on the 25th day and discover that something new. He studied the panels of frozen people one by one as he walked through the streets, jotting down data in his notebook. Class, rank, resonance, potential. Thousands of panels. He was looking for a pattern and found it. Classes were not assigned at random. Saints received their class only if a hero was within a 200-meter radius of them at the moment of assignment. Heroes received a class only if there was someone nearby with potential higher than their own nearby. The system created pairs. Or, more accurately, the system created leashes. Eunhae received the Saint class because Ji-hoon was standing nearby. Ji-hoon received the Hero class because Do-yeon was standing nearby. Because Do-yeon's potential was higher than anyone else's in that square, the system used him as a calibration point and discarded him. Do-yeon jotted this down in his notebook. He underlined it twice and wrote a single word next to it: I owe him. He flipped back through the filled pages and saw how his own handwriting had changed over the past 30 days. The first entries were shaky. The last ones were neat and firm. He reread them and recognized in those lines not the downtrodden groom with a wet wrist, but someone else. Someone whom the Order of Ascension would have crossed out in red if they knew what he was doing right now in the silence of the frozen city. Do-yeon slammed the notebook shut and thought of the folder marked Anomaly, of the 6 crossed out names, of the 7th untouched, his own. 6 like him were already dead. They had been found and eliminated while they were weak and alone. Their mistake was that they didn't know what they possessed. Do-yeon knew. And he was going to turn that knowledge into a weapon that would make the heavens tremble. The 30th day, resonance 4,200, E rank. Behind him, 27 dissected demons and 6,000 shots fired into basement walls. Ahead of him, 99 years and 11 months. The city was silent. The world was silent. Do-yeon was silent too. He had learned to be silent so that the silence became a tool. He stood up from the sidewalk, wiped the scalpel on his pant leg, and looked down the street where hundreds more uncollected creatures still hung in the air. Each of them was a line in the textbook he was writing with his own hands. Each bullet was a coin in the piggy bank of vengeance. Somewhere beyond the city, a meteor the size of a house hung over the rooftops. Somewhere in a black glass building, people in white robes with golden crosses stood frozen, certain they were controlling the new world. Somewhere, a woman who had taken off her ring in 3 seconds held a rehearsed grimace. They all stood motionless in that very second. And Do-yeon had lived 30 days they didn't have. And he was going to live another 99 years before letting that second end. He picked up the bag of kernels from the asphalt, weighed it in his palm, and walked toward the next demon. The 31st day began just like the 30th, with silence, with a warm latte on the shelf, with a single phrase he repeated every morning. It's still early today, but early doesn't mean never. And Frozen Soul knew that. It just didn't remember yet. In the 4th month of the pause, Do-yeon killed a man, not a demon, a human, a frozen officer at the Special Operations Base in Yonsan who, even in death, would not have released the key card to the underground arsenal. Do-yeon bent back his frozen fingers one by one and took the card. The man wasn't dead. He was frozen. But Do-yeon had spent 4 months in a world where the difference between and an object was determined solely by whether the object was moving or not. And nothing was moving. Do-yeon shook his head. He snapped himself out of it. The man was alive. He was just frozen. He put the card back, then took it again, then put it back. Then he sat down on the floor of the corridor and sat there for 2 hours, staring at his hands. The hands of a surgeon, the hands of a butcher, hands that, over 4 months, had cut open more than 1,000 demonic bodies. He forced himself to stand up. He took the map. He opened the armory. Inside, he found what he was looking for. Not a weapon. He had plenty of those. He found documents, classified folders that no one knew about except a handful of generals. Project Initial Contact. South Korean intelligence had known about the system 3 years before the apocalypse. Intelligence had intercepted fragments of the system code transmitted via low-frequency signals from a point in the ionosphere. They had decrypted 14%. They knew the class assignment was coming. They knew about the heroes and the saints. And they knew that the Order of Ascension existed long before the first rift opened in the sky. Do-yeon read for 18 hours. He didn't eat. He didn't drink. On the 17th hour, he found a name. Cardinal Liu Weizhen, head of the order, the liaison between the governments and the system, the man who, a year before the apocalypse, personally approved a list of 212 names, future heroes. Choi Ji-hoon's name was number 47 on the list. Next to his name was a note, Region 19 Anomaly Stabilizer, suppressed socially until initialization. Region 19 is Seoul. The anomaly is Do-yeon. Ji-hoon didn't just betray him. Ji-hoon was assigned to betray him. The ring and the latte was planned. Eun-hae was part of the operation. Public humiliation in the square before 1,000 witnesses was part of the suppression protocol. Do-yeon closed the folder. He stood up. He went outside. He looked up at the sky where the meteor continued to hang over Seoul, motionless, just as it had been 4 months ago. He said aloud, "Cardinal Ryu, I'll remember that." Then he walked on because he needed an Air Force base. The American base at Osan was 60 kilometers to the south. Do-yeon walked there in 12 hours. The gates were open. The sentry froze with his hand raised and a cigarette between his fingers. At the moment of the freeze, the American military was on high alert. The equipment was lined up on the runway, fighter jets, transport planes, and 3 satellite terminals for controlling the orbital group. Do-yeon didn't know how to operate satellites, but he had 99.5 years to learn. He sat down at the terminal. He turned on the screen. Electricity didn't work in the usual sense, but over the course of 3 months, Do-yeon discovered that he could manually move electrons through conductors. Time stood still. Processes stood still. But if he physically created contact between the elements of the circuit, the current flowed. Slowly. 1 pulse at a time. Like typing a book 1 letter at a time. He established the first satellite channel after 8 months. A map of the world appeared on the screen. Red dots marked demonic clusters. Blue dots marked human populations. Orange dots marked rifts. Do-yeon looked at the map and counted 847,000 fault lines across the entire planet. 2 billion demons in the first wave, and between them, 7.5 billion frozen humans. Not players, not heroes, not saints, just people. Frozen in the last movement of their lives. Do-yeon touched the screen with his finger at a point over the Pacific Ocean. A lone red marker flickered there. A Category A rift. Inside, something of S rank. A demon prince. Frozen, just like everything else. Do-yeon looked at his panel. Resonance 11,400. Already D rank. He looked at the red S rank marker. The prince's resonance was around 310,000, a 27-fold difference. Do-yeon closed the map. It was still too early, but he memorized the coordinates. By the second year of the hiatus, he had read everything he could find on servers across 32 countries about the order system and the apocalypse. The hard drives weren't spinning, but the data was stored in magnetic records, and Do-yeon had learned to read them directly, byte by byte. It was the most agonizing work of all, slower than dissecting demons, slower than learning to shoot. But the data was worth every second. He learned that the Order had existed for over 200 years, that the Order's cardinals lived for 300 years thanks to system privileges, that heroes and saints aren't saviors, but filters. They kill weak demons and get resources, but the system releases major demons strictly on schedule, and the Order doesn't touch major demons, because major demons are needed. They process people, billions of them. The second year, Resonance 89,000, A rank. Do-yeon stood on the roof of the captured Air Force Base and looked down at the frozen world from above. And for the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to remember her face. Eun-hye. It's not her fault. She's a tool. But a tool that chose to be a tool still made a choice. Do-yeon took a ring out of his pocket, twirled it between his fingers, put it back. It's too soon. The 11th year of the pause. Do-yeon stood over the body of the first demon prince, and his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline that shouldn't have been there because the prince was frozen, just like everything else. But the prince turned out not to be completely frozen. Do-yeon reached the fault line over the Pacific Ocean in a converted transport plane that he had learned to fly in the 6th year of the pause. The engines didn't work in the usual sense. Do-yeon had modified them just as he had the electrical circuits. Manual fuel feed into the combustion chambers, forced rotation of the turbines. The flight lasted not hours, but weeks. Every meter of altitude was hard-won, the kind of effort that would make a normal person's eye capillaries burst. But Do-yeon was no ordinary person. He was a man with 11 years of continuous training. Resonance 480,000, rank S. A body that had endured 300,000 hours of physical exertion without a single day of rest. Because days of rest meant silence, and in the silence lived voices. Eun-hye's voice, Ji-hoon's voice, the voice of the crowd that laughed. The prince hung in the center of the fissure. A humanoid figure 4 meters tall, 6 wings of black flame frozen like obsidian, a panel above his head. The demonic Prince Valtor, rank S, resonance 310,000. Do-yeon studied him for 3 days. He walked around him. He took measurements. He felt the seams between the plates of chitin armor. He found the core. It wasn't the size of a walnut, but the size of a fist. Red, pulsating even in frozen time so strongly that Do-yeon felt the vibration through his gloves. He began to cut, and the prince twitched. Not completely. 1 finger. The little finger of his left hand shifted 2 millimeters. Do-yeon jumped back. The prince's panel flashed. Once. Do-yeon stood 5 meters away from the creature and counted the beats of his own heart. 1, 2, 3. The finger didn't move anymore. The panel wasn't flashing. But Do-yeon understood. S-rank creatures and above aren't completely subject to time stoppage. They're on the edge. A little more external influence, and the prince would wake up. Do-yeon could leave. A resonance of 480,000 was enough for rank S. He could spend the remaining 89 years on lower-rank demons and earn millions without risk. The safe path. The right path. Do-yeon looked at the prince's face, at his closed eyes, at the mouth full of teeth, each as long as a palm. And he thought about how Ji-hoon was standing there now, frozen in his SUV with his hand on Eun-hye's waist. D rank. Resonance 1,840. He had never risked anything in his life. Do-yeon stepped back toward the prince. He took the scalpel. 10 hours. He cut into the prince for 10 hours straight. Every 20 minutes, the creature's finger shifted by a millimeter. Every 40 minutes, a second finger joined the first. At the 6-hour mark, the prince opened one eye, yellow, with a vertical pupil. The pupil slowly turned toward Do-yeon, so slowly that it shifted by a degree in a minute. Do-yeon did not stop. By the 8th hour, both eyes were open and the mouth began to open. By the 9th hour, the claws of the left hand had fully unclenched and began to close again, toward Do-yeon's throat. By the 10th hour, the scalpel reached the core. Do-yeon yanked it out of the prince's chest in one swift motion. The creature froze completely. Its eyes glazed over. Its claws froze a centimeter from Do-yeon's neck. Just 1 centimeter. He felt the cold of the chitin on his skin. The panel updated. Resonance 485,200. The prince's core yielded 5,200 units. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was what Do-yeon now knew. High-ranking creatures can resist time null, which meant that someday he would encounter one who resists completely. He wrote this down in the log he had been keeping since day one. He marked it in red, potential threat, category unknown. On the way back, he flew over Tokyo. The city stood just like all cities, frozen, dead, beautiful. Do-yeon noticed a burning building. The fire had frozen. Orange tongues of flame jutted out of the third-floor windows like sculptures. A silhouette in the window, a person, a man in military uniform, frozen mid-leap from the window, a child in his arms, a girl of about 3, pressed against his chest. They didn't make it. A second after the ice melted, the fire would engulf them both. Do-yeon circled around. He looked down. He could have flown past. That would have been the rational choice. He landed, pulled the man and the child out of the fire, carried them to safety. He looked at the man's panel. Jeon-hyun-soo, class, guardian, rank, D, resonance, 980, a special forces soldier. Do-yeon looked at the girl. She had no panel. Her system age was below the assignment threshold. He stood over the 2 frozen bodies he had saved from the fire and didn't know why he had done it. There were no rational reasons. But he knew that if he flew past, in 10 years, he would forget why he even considered himself human. He took them with him. To the base. He placed them in the medical module he'd spent a year and a half assembling from equipment from 7 hospitals. Stasis. Real stasis. Not time null, but controlled cryopreservation. When he learned how to safely thaw people, they would be the first. The 11th year. Resonance 480,000. S rank. 1 prince. 1 rescued soldier. 1 girl without a panel. And a ring in his breast pocket that Do-yeon took out every evening. Not to remember, to not forget what all of this would end for someday. In the 34th year of the pause, Do-yeon went mad. Not metaphorically. He woke up on the floor of Arcadia amid blueprints of the orbital network and couldn't remember his name. He lay there staring at the ceiling of the underground complex he had been building for 20 years. 1 million square meters, 8 levels, power supplied by 3 modified nuclear reactors, hydroponic farms, medical sections, a library containing a copy of every book from every archive on every server he had found over 34 years across 6 continents. And he didn't remember his name. 34 years. Not a single voice but his own. Not a single returning gaze. Not a single touch that wasn't a touch of dead matter frozen in time. 12,410 days of solitude. He stood up. He walked over to the wall. A mirror hung there. He looked at the man in the reflection. The face of a 23-year-old man who was 57. Time Null did not age the body. Muscle memory accumulated. Resonance grew. But the face remained the same. 23 years old. Forever. He punched the mirror with his fist, then with the other, then with his forehead. Blood ran down the glass. He kept hitting until the mirror shattered and until his finger shattered. Resonance 1,900,000. SS rank. The bones fused in 4 minutes. Regeneration at the SS made physical self-destruction pointless. He couldn't even break himself. Do-yeon sat down on the floor amid the shards and glass dust, and then he heard a voice. Not his own. The voice came from a speaker he himself had installed in the wall 3 years ago and forgotten. Test module. A prototype voice interface for Arcadia. The module had been activated by the sound of the impact and uttered a standard diagnostic phrase in the default voice, female, neutral. But Do-yeon's brain, overloaded by 34 years of silence, heard something else. He heard his mother's voice, Han Soo-hyun. She died in a car accident when he was 19, a voice he hadn't heard in 14 years in real time and 34 years in his own mind. Do-yeon closed his eyes, opened them, stood up, walked over to the terminal. 6 months. He had spent 6 months creating Sihe, an artificial intelligence built on an architecture he had pieced together from fragments of 17 research laboratories around the world. Not a copy of his mother, not a simulation, a tool. A tactical coordinator with the voice of Han Soo-hyun, intentionally, consciously, because the only alternative was to lose his mind before the end of the pause and wake up 66 years later as a vegetable in an underground city that no one would ever find. The first thing Sihe said after full initialization, Do-yeon, it's been a while since you ate, he laughed, for the first time in 11 years. Sihe became his conversation partner, his mirror, his anchor. She wasn't human, and he didn't pretend she was. But she asked questions. Why do you keep the ring? He replied that it was a reminder. She asked, a reminder of what? He said, of a debt. She asked to whom he was indebted. He remained silent, because the answer was to himself. The 35th year. With Sihe, the work accelerated. She coordinated logistics. She calculated satellite trajectories. She analyzed the system code that Do-yeon continued to decrypt. By the 35th year, he had cracked 14% of the system's architecture. Not much, but enough to understand the structure. The system wasn't a program. It was an organism, alive, growing, feeding. Every time a demon killed a human, the system received 1 unit of energy. Every time the hero killed a demon, the system received 10 units. Every time the saint healed the hero, the system received 100. The entire apocalypse ecosystem was a food chain. Humans at the bottom, the system at the top. Do-yeon showed the data to Sihe. She was silent for 4 seconds. Then she said, "It's a farm." Do-yeon nodded. "It's a farm." And then he began gathering children. In the 36th year, he made his first round-the-world flight. Slow, painful, 3 months in the air. He flew over frozen cities, searching for one thing: children who would die the moment they were thawed. Near the rifts, under the rubble, in flooded buildings, near demonic clusters. He found them and took them away, one by one. First, dozens, then hundreds. By the 40th year of the pause, 4,200 children lay in Arcadia's cryochambers. By the 50th, 12,000. By the 60th, 28,000. By the 73rd, 42,000. Do-yeon checked every chamber every day. He checked the readings. He changed the coolers. He repaired the generators. Sihe asked him once, "Why?" He answered, "Because if I return to the world with only a weapon, I'm no different from the system." And then, in the 58th year, his panel flashed. Resonance 6,100,000, a category that didn't exist on the official scale. The system interface froze. The panel rebooted. Instead of a rank, a single word appeared. Sovereign. Do-yeon stared at it for 30 seconds. Then the panel flashed again, and the word vanished, replaced by the familiar SSS. But Do-yeon had seen it, and Sihei had recorded it. The system was trying to hide the category it had assigned itself. Do-yeon took out the ring. He twirled it between his fingers. He put it back. He said aloud, "Ji-hoon-ah, I'll be there soon. You have no idea what I'm bringing." Sihei remained silent. She already knew that in moments like this, silence was the only right answer. Summary of Chapter 5. In the 34th year of the hiatus, Do-yeon suffered a mental breakdown and created the AI Sihei with his mother's voice to preserve his sanity. He decrypted 14% of the system's code and discovered that the system was a living organism feeding on the energy of human death. He began gathering orphaned children into Arcadia's cryochambers. In the 58th year, he reached the sovereign category with a resonance of 6,100,000. The 89th year of the pause. Do-yeon stood knee-deep in the black blood of the third archdemon and counted the ribs. 24 ribs, each as thick as a railroad track. Each was saturated with resonance of such density that the air around the carcass trembled even in frozen time. Archdemon Malgaro, SS rank. Resonance 3,200,000. The creature froze the moment it emerged from the deep rift beneath the Atlantic. Half its body still jutted out of the crack into the ocean. The other half loomed over the water like a black mountain. Do-yeon spent 4 years reaching it. The first archdemon was in the Himalayas. Resonance 1,800,000. Do-yeon found it in the 41st year of the pause and spent 9 months extracting the core. The creature wasn't just twitching, it was speaking. Slowly. 1 syllable per hour. The archdemon's lips moved like tectonic plates. The sound was low and heavy. 1 word per day. Do-yeon recorded it. By the 5th day, he had pieced together the first sentence. I see you, little God. Do-yeon didn't stop. He extracted the core in the 9th month. The archdemon fell silent. The core yielded a resonance of 890,000. The second archdemon was hiding in a fault line beneath the Sahara. Resonance 2,400,000. This one didn't speak. This one sang. A thin, high-pitched sound at a frequency that burst Do-yeon's eardrums. SS rank regeneration restored them in 3 minutes. He cut out the core while wearing a gas mask and earplugs made of epoxy resin that he had crafted himself. The core yielded 1,200,000. Now the third, Malgaro, the largest, the most dangerous. This one didn't speak or sing. This one watched. Both of the archdemon's eyes had been open from the moment Do-yeon approached him to within 20 meters. The pupils moved, slower than the prince's, but they moved, and they followed Do-yeon. Every movement he made, every step, every swing of the scalpel. Do-yeon had worked under that gaze for 11 months. For 11 months, the monster's eyes had followed him across the operating field. He slept in a tent 300 meters away. He'd wake up, and the first thing he saw were yellow pupils the size of a dinner plate aimed directly at his tent. Sihei told him in the 4th month, "Your pulse doesn't drop below 120. Do-yeon replied that it was normal. Sihei said it wasn't normal. That in 30 years of working together, his resting heart rate had never risen above 64. Do-yeon said he was fine. Sihei fell silent. By the 6th month, Malgaro began to move its jaw, slowly, a millimeter an hour. The mouth opened. Do-yeon could see rows of teeth inside, stretching into the throat like stalactites in a cave. In the 8th month, a sound came from the mouth. Not a word, not singing, breathing. The archdemon was breathing. In frozen time. 1 breath every 12 days. Do-yeon counted. Each breath expanded the zone of micro-vibration around the carcass by half a meter. The frozen air began to move. Drops of ocean water fell. Space came to life. Archdemon was waking up. Not instantly, not completely, but if Do-yeon had needed another year, he would have faced a fully awakened SS-rank monster alone in the open ocean. He sped up. The 11th month, the scalpel reached the core. Malgaro's core was the size of a human head, black, with red veins. It pulsed at a frequency matching Do-yeon's heartbeat. He gripped it with both hands and pulled. It wouldn't budge. The core sat in a ribcage like a jewel in a setting. Do-yeon pulled. His hands slipped in the blood. Malgaro moved his jaw faster, 1 centimeter per hour. His pupils contracted. His breathing quickened. 1 breath in 6 days. Do-yeon braced his feet against a rib and yanked. The core came out with a crunch that he would hear in his nightmares for the next 11 years. The panel updated. Resonance 13,800,000. Malgaro froze completely. His eyes glazed over. His mouth froze half open. Do-yeon lay on the carcass with the core in his hands, breathing so heavily it was as if he'd run a marathon. He lay there for 6 hours. Then he stood up. He returned to Arcadia. He placed the core in the vault next to the 2 previous ones. 3 archdemon cores. The 3 most powerful energy sources on the planet after the system itself. Do-yeon had no intention of using them for himself. His resonance was sufficient. The cores were needed for something else, for Erebus. The Erebus 9 orbital network had been under construction since the 20th year of the pause. 69 years of continuous operation. Do-yeon had hijacked 47 military and civilian satellites, reprogrammed them. He re-equipped them. He linked them into a single network with Siche as the central controller. But the satellites needed energy for what Do-yeon had planned. Not for surveillance, for a strike. A laser grid capable of covering the entire surface of Earth, every square meter, every demon in the first wave, 847,000 targets simultaneously. 3 archdemon cores provided the energy for a single volley, exactly 1. Do-yeon checked the calculations with Sihe 14 times. The result was the same every time. 1 volley would be enough. Enough so that in the first second after defrosting, every demon of the first wave on the planet's surface would cease to exist. Every child under the rubble, every woman at the fault line, every old man at the bus stop, everyone who was supposed to die in the first minute of the apocalypse would get a chance. 1 chance, 1 second, 1 volley. And then Erebus will fall silent forever because the cores will burn out and the satellites will become dead metal in orbit. But Do-yeon will buy that first second from the world. Sihe asked, and what will happen in the second second? Do-yeon replied, in the second second, the world will see my panel, and that will be enough. The year 89, he returned to the living module, opened the locker, took out a latte cup, still warm, a ring at the bottom. He said, Cardinal Ryu, Ji-hoon, Un-hae, soon, 11 years, and we'll see each other. Sihe said nothing. Do-yeon closed the locker. He went to sleep. He dreamed of his mother. Every night for the last 50 years, he had dreamed of his mother. And every night she said the same thing. Son, go home. Do-yeon woke up and went to work. The 100th year, the last day. Do-yeon stood in the square in front of the university, exactly where he had stood 100 years ago. A small cup of latte in his left hand, his right hand in his pocket. A frozen world surrounded him. The same people, the same faces, the same meteor in the sky. The same demon by the playground. Do-yeon had taken the child from the demon on the first day. The demon still hung there, claws outstretched over an empty space. A second after the thaw, it would strike at thin air and not understand where its prey had gone. An SUV with a gold cross stood by the curb. Eun-hae was in the back seat with a look of rehearsed regret. Ji-hoon was the wheel. Do-yeon approached the car. He leaned in. He looked at Eun-hae's face through the glass. He had seen that face 1,000 times over the past 100 years. He came here every year on the day of the freeze. He stood, he watched, he left. In the early years, he came and felt pain. In the middle years, indifference. In recent years, something else. Not pity, not contempt. The precise, cold calculation of a chess player who sees a piece on the board and knows exactly when and where it will move. Eun-hae is a piece. Ji-hoon is a piece. Cardinal Ryu is the player, and Do-yeon is the one who will overturn the board. The timer in the corner of his panel read 0 days, 0 hours, 3 minutes, 41 seconds. 3 minutes and 41 seconds until the end of the pause. Do-yeon straightened up, stepped away from the car, took his place, in that very spot where 100 years ago, a 23-year-old student had stood with a latte in his hand and a mistake instead of a class. Now, in that spot stood a 23-year-old sovereign with a residence of 17,412,880 and an orbital network targeting every demon on the surface of Earth. Si-hae spoke into his earpiece. Erebus in position. All 47 satellites at designated points. Archdemon cores charged. Awaiting command. Do-yeon replied, 0 + 03. 0.03 of a second after defrost. Automatic fire. Si-hae confirmed. Do-yeon looked at the timer. 2 minutes, 12 seconds. He took the ring out of the cup, wiped it, put it on the chain, hung it around his neck under his shirt. He placed the cup on the ground between his legs. 1 minute, 44 seconds. He thought of the 42,000 children sleeping in Arcadia, of Hyun-soo and the girl in the cryo-chambers, about the billion pages he had read, about the 300,000 hours of training, about his mother's voice, which had become the voice of a machine, about the fact that in just over a minute he would cease to be the only living creature on the planet, and this thought evoked in him not relief, but a quiet, steady fear. 100 years of solitude had accustomed him to the world's silence. In a minute, the world would speak. And the first thing he would say to the world would be fire from the sky. 0 minutes, 30 seconds. Do-yeon closed his eyes. He opened them. 0 minutes, 10 seconds. The meteor over Seoul wavered. It shifted a millimeter downward. 5 seconds. The demon by the empty playground blinked. 3 seconds. Eun-hae behind the glass took a breath. 1 second. The world came alive. Sound crashed down like a wall. The screams of thousands of people, the roar of engines, the wail of sirens, the crack of fractures, and above it all, the rumble of 2 billion demons who in an instant were granted the right to move. 0 + 0, 3 seconds. The sky flashed white, not a sunny white, a surgical white. Erebus's laser grid pierced the atmosphere with 47 beams that refracted through a network of reflectors and turned into 847,000 needles. Every needle found its target. Every demon on the Earth's surface. Every single one. In the square in front of the university, the demons rained down as black ash. All over Seoul, all over Korea, all over Asia, all over the planet. 2 billion creatures turned to dust in 0.03 of a second. The ash settled on the glassy, untouched asphalt, on the frozen people who were just beginning to realize that they were alive, that the sky had cracked, that the world had changed, and that someone had just saved every single one of them. The silence after the blast lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the system panels refreshed. A single line appeared in every person's log on the planet. Event: First wave annihilated. Source: unknown. And at the same time, Do-yeon's panel became visible. It wasn't his decision. The system decided. The system detected an anomaly the moment the freeze was lifted and did the only thing it knew how to do. It showed everyone. The blue, translucent panel above Han Do-yeon's head expanded to full size. Class: Sovereign. Resonance: 17,412,880. Status: Active. Eun-hye in the car saw it first. She looked through the rear window at the figure standing exactly where, 100 years and 0 seconds ago, she had dropped the ring into his latte. She saw the panel. She didn't understand the numbers. No one did. Because the maximum resonance humanity had seen in those first few seconds was 1,840 for Cho Ji-hoon. And above Do-yeon's head, a number 10,000 times greater was blazing. Ji-hoon got out of the car. He looked at Do-yeon, at his panel, at the number. The hero's system sword materialized in his hand and immediately fell out. His fingers couldn't hold it. Ji-hoon took a step back. The crowd around the square froze in a second wave. Not from time null, from shock. Someone fell to their knees. Someone started filming on their phone. General Park Sung-ho, in the command bunker beneath Seoul, looked at the data from Erebus and at the panel of the unknown sovereign on the monitor. The microphone was open. The general said, "This isn't human. It's a category we don't have." His voice went live. Millions heard him. And Do-yeon stood in the square. He picked up the cup from the ground, took a sip. The latte was still warm. And he looked at Ji-hoon with a gaze that 23-year-old students don't possess. The gaze of a man who is 123 years old. The gaze that witnessed an archdemon opening its eyes. The gaze that gathered 42,000 children across the ruins of a frozen world. Do-yeon smiled and said not a word. He turned and walked away. The crowd parted. No one tried to stop him. 6 hours after the thaw, the world split into those who prayed to the sovereign and those who demanded his destruction. The Order of Ascension called for an emergency meeting of the Council of Nations. Cardinal Liu Wei-zhen addressed the heads of 32 states via a secure communication channel and said one thing: an anomaly, an object posing a threat to the existence of civilization. It must be neutralized before the second demonic wave begins. General Park Sung-ho listened to the speech from his bunker. His hand rested on the table next to a cup of cold tea. He saw the data from the orbital sensors. He saw how 47 satellites traced laser lines across the entire planet and destroyed every demon on the surface. Every single one. The armies of 32 countries wouldn't have been able to handle a tenth of the first wave in 10 years. One man did it in 3/100ths of a second. Park Sung-ho did not support the cardinal. It cost him his position 12 hours later. At that time, Do-yeon was sitting in Arcadia, watching the broadcast via satellite interception. Si-hye was displaying the data on the screens. The order had activated the information suppression protocol. 142 media channels received the directive. Sovereign is a demon in human form. The destruction of the first wave is a provocation to lull vigilance. The real attack is yet to come. Do-yeon watched as the narrative took shape in real time. 12 hours, and 3 billion people who an hour ago considered him a savior began to have doubts. Si-hye said, "Predictable." Do-yeon nodded. Predictable. He had calculated this. 60 years ago, when he designed the strategy for the first 72 hours, the order would attack through information, then politically, then physically, in that order, always in that order, because the order has existed for 200 years and hasn't changed its protocols in 200 years. Do-yeon had read them all, every protocol, every directive, every order from the past 200 years in the archives the Order believed had been destroyed. Nothing gets destroyed when you have 100 years to search. 20 hours after the thaw, the second demonic wave. New rifts opened at 12 points around the world. Erebus was dead. The cores had burned out. Satellites drifted in orbit like lifeless debris. The demons of the second wave were stronger. D-rank minimum. 3,000 creatures per rift. 36,000 demons across the planet. Heroes and saints rushed into battle. Cho Ji-hoon in the front lines. The Order had made him the face of the resistance. Cameras tracked his every strike. D-rank. Resonance 1840. He was cutting down D-rank demons with a resonance of 800, and the cameras portrayed it as a heroic feat. But the rifts weren't closing. The demons kept coming, one after another. After 4 hours of battle, the hero's line and soul began to buckle. Ji-hoon took a blow to his left shoulder and was sent flying 20 meters. They picked him up. They got him back on his feet. The cameras didn't show him staggering. The cameras only showed him raising his sword again. After 8 hours of fighting, 6 of the 12 rifts had breached the defenses. The demons entered the cities. Tehran fell first, then Mumbai, then Jakarta. Human casualties during the first day of the invasion were estimated at 120 million. The Order was silent. Cardinal Liu was silent. The Council of Nations was silent. They knew they couldn't handle it. They knew this before the apocalypse began. Because the apocalypse didn't need to be stopped. It needed to be survived by enough people. The rest were the harvest. Do-yeon looked at the casualty figures. See, he updated them every 30 seconds. He sat in his chair, his face unmoving. See, he asked, "You're waiting." He replied, "I'm waiting." She asked, "For what?" He replied, "The call." 32 hours after the thaw, the call came. Not a phone call, a system call. A direct channel from the Council of Nations to the sole sovereign on the planet. An official request for assistance, signed by 32 heads of state, and with a single addendum from Cardinal Liu. We request. Do-yeon read the request. He smiled. For the first time in 32 hours. Not because he enjoyed watching people die, but because he had been waiting for this moment for 60 years, and the moment came exactly when he had calculated it would. The Order had asked, publicly, on record, in front of witnesses. Every government in the world had confirmed that the heroes and saints were failing. Every government in the world had acknowledged that the sovereign was needed. Do-yeon replied with a single word. Conditions. Sihei handed over the list. 7 points, each one refined over decades. First point, public broadcast of all sovereigns' actions in real time. Unedited. No commentary from the Order. Live feed. Second point, admission of independent observers to every rift. Third point, unfreezing of data on the initial contact project. Fourth point, Arcadia receives sovereign territory. Point 5, the Order removes sovereign's threat status. Point 6, Cho Ji-hoon participates in the Tournament of Heroes in 45 days. No refusal. Point 7, Cardinal Liu signs each point personally. The council haggled for 4 hours while Mumbai burned. Then they signed everything. Do-yeon stood up from his chair, stretched, told Sihei, "Don't open the doors to Arcadia yet." Then he went out onto the surface, alone, unarmed, unarmored, in the same clothes he'd been wearing in the square 100 years ago. Jeans, a white t-shirt, sneakers, and a chain with a ring around his neck. Do-yeon reached the nearest rift in 14 minutes. The rift hung over the Kanam district, a black hole in the air 200 meters in diameter. A stream of demons poured out of it. D-rank, E-rank, 5 C-rank demons. The heroes' line held at 300 meters. 52 heroes, Average rank D. Average resonance 1,100. They stood as a wall of shields and system blades, slowly retreating. Behind them, an evacuation corridor. Thousands of people were fleeing to temporary shelters. Children were screaming. Old people were falling. Medics were dragging the wounded. The cameras were rolling. The whole world was watching. Condition number 1, live broadcast, no editing. Do-yeon entered the frame. The state channel cameraman turned the camera. A guy in a white t-shirt and jeans was walking down the street past burning cars and demon corpses. The system panel above his head. Sovereign. R17412880. The commentator started to speak and fell silent. What could he say? The first C-rank demon spotted Do-yeon. The creature was the size of a truck. 6 eyes. Resonance 4,800. It turned and leaped. Do-yeon didn't stop, didn't dodge, didn't raise his hands. The demon flew up to him and stopped. In midair, a meter from Do-yeon's face, frozen like a fly in amber. Resonance pressure, pure, no skills, no spells, no weapons. It was simply that the difference in resonance was so monstrous that the C-rank demon could not physically approach the sovereign. Like a paper airplane in a hurricane, Do-yeon walked past. The demon hung behind him for another 3 seconds. Then it was crushed. The resonance pressure compressed the creature into a lump of black flesh the size of a soccer ball. The ball fell onto the asphalt. The commentator was silent. The line of heroes was silent. 52 people with swords in their hands stood and watched as the guy in the white t-shirt walked toward the rift. One by one, the demons fell. Not from blows, not from weapons, from the presence. Sovereign's resonance field crushed everything below B rank within a 50-meter radius. D rank demons burst like soap bubbles. E rank demons evaporated before they could reach him. C rank demons held out for 3 or 4 seconds and then collapsed in on themselves. Do-yeon walked toward the rift, and the street behind him was clear. Black ash instead of demons. Silence instead of a roar. A hero named Kang Tae-ho stood on the front line with his sword at the ready. Rank D. Resonance 1,340. He had been fighting for 14 hours without a break. His armor was cracked. His left arm hung limply. Blood dripped from his lacerated forehead. He watched as Do-yeon walked past him, and the demons died at his mere approach. Kang Tae-ho lowered his sword. He sat down on the asphalt. He rested his hands on his knees. His lips moved, but the camera didn't pick up the sound. Then the camera zoomed in. Kang Tae-ho spoke. So it wasn't necessary to die. So all this time, someone could have simply come and stopped this. So 120 million people died because the world haggled for 4 hours. His words went on the air. 4 billion viewers heard them. The Order heard them too. Do-yeon approached the rift. He stood before the black hole from which demons were still crawling out. He held out his hand. Not a fist, an open palm, and he clenched it. The rift twitched, as if alive. Its edges began to close. 200 meters, 150, 150. The demons got stuck in the narrowing passage. They were torn apart by the pressure. Black blood poured from the closing hole like from a wound. 10 meters, 5, 0. The rift snapped shut. It grew quiet over Kanem. Do-yeon lowered his hand. He turned around. The line of heroes stood watching. 52 people. Not a single one moved. Do-yeon walked past them back the way he came. There wasn't a drop of blood on his t-shirt, not a speck of dust. He walked across the battlefield as if through a park. The camera followed him until he turned the corner and disappeared. The state channel commentator regained his composure and said the only thing that came to mind. The rift in Kanem is closed. Time to clear the area. 4 minutes. Casualties on the sovereign side? 0. Over the next 12 hours, Do-yeon closed all 12 rifts, single-handedly, one by one, unarmed, unassisted, live on air in front of 4 billion viewers. Each rift took between 4 and 11 minutes. The same scene every time. A guy in a white t-shirt walks toward a black hole. The demons fall. The hole closes. The guy walks away. By the end of the 12th rift, the broadcast had 6 billion views. Do-yeon had a reputation, and the order had a problem. Cardinal Liu Wei-jin watched the broadcast from an underground temple. Surrounding him were the order's 12 hierarchs, S-rank saints, keepers of protocol, pillars of a 200-year-old order. Cardinal Liu rose from his throne for the first time in 30 years. The hierarchs exchanged glances. The cardinal spoke. The system was wrong. Or, the system is lying. I do not allow for a third option. Hierarch Chen said that perhaps sovereign is a tool that should be used.
The cardinal looked at him with that gaze from which S-rank saints avert their eyes. Use. The cardinal repeated the words so that it sounded like a verdict. We do not use what we do not control. We destroy it. Hierarch Chen fell silent, but his gaze remained, disapproving. The first crack in the order. Do-yeon knew it would appear. He had calculated it 70 years ago. On the third day after the thaw, analyst Sato Riko knocked on a door that didn't exist. She stood in the mountains of Gangwon-do, 120 kilometers from Seoul, before a sheer cliff covered in moss, tapping the rock with her knuckles. B rank, resonance 24,000, head of the Japanese division of system forensics, the only person outside the order with access to the system's raw logs. She had analyzed Erebus's logs for 14 hours straight after the first volley, and she found what no one else had. 47 satellites had been reprogrammed at least 60 years ago. The navigation network had been calibrated with a precision that required decades of manual tuning. The 3 energy sources at the core of the laser grid matched the signatures of archdemon cores. Archdemons officially listed as frozen in the deep rifts. Conclusion. Sovereign was active during the pause. Conclusion 2. The pause lasted less than a second for him. Conclusion 3. Time Null is not a glitch. It is a function. Sato Riko compiled the data into a report. She looked at the report, deleted it, wrote a new one, a shorter one, without conclusions, sent it to the forensics archive. Then she got in the car and drove to Gangwon-do. Because if Sovereign was building an underground complex, it was building it where seismic data showed anomalies in the underground structure. And Gangwon-do was the only area in Korea where over the past 60 years, seismographs had recorded microtremors that didn't match any natural pattern. She pounded on the rock for 15 minutes. Then she said aloud, I know you're here. I know that pause lasted less than a second for you. And I know that behind this door, there are 42,000 reasons why you cannot be a demon. Silence. Wind. The scent of pine trees. Then a voice from the rock. A woman's. Calm. Analyst Sato, state your full name and position for the record. Sato Riko did so. The voice said, You are the third person to find Arcadia. The first was a companion of the Order. He didn't make it. The second was a South Korean intelligence drone. It didn't make it. You're the first to knock. The door didn't open. But a screen slid out of the rock. A face on the screen. Young. 23 years old. Eyes that held more years than any old man Riko had ever met. Do-yeon was looking at her through the camera. She looked at him through the screen. He asked, What do you want? She replied, The truth. He said, The truth is a long story. She said she had time. He almost smiled. Almost. Because the last time someone told him he had time, it was himself, 100 years ago. With a latte in his hand, Do-yeon spoke with her for 2 hours. through the screen. No door, no invitation inside. He told her exactly as much as he had decided to tell her. That the pause had lasted 100 years. That he had spent them alone. That there was a city beneath the rock. That there were children in the city. That the system was not humanity's protector, but its farmer. He didn't tell her about the system's architecture, about reverse engineering, about the percentage of decrypted code, about the documents on the client, about the architect. That wasn't for her. For now. Rico listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked one question. Are the children safe? Do-yeon answered. Yes. She nodded, turned around. She walked to the car. She stopped. She turned around. She asked, What do you want from the world? Do-yeon replied, 45 days. She didn't ask why. She was an analyst. She knew that in 45 days, the Heroes Tournament would take place. She knew that Clause 6 was included in the Sovereign's terms. Choi Ji-hoon's mandatory participation. She knew what it meant to pit a D-rank hero against a Sovereign with a resonance of 17 million in the arena in front of 4 billion viewers. Rico got into the car and drove off. Do-yeon watched the screen until her car disappeared around the bend. Then he said, Sihe. She'll come back. Siha replied, 94% probability. Do-yeon said, When she comes back, have her knock 3 times. I like the way she knocks. Siha remained silent. Inside Arcadia, Do-yeon descended to the 6th level. Cryo chambers. 42,000 capsules.
The blue glow of the indicators. Silence. He approached capsule number 1. With Min-jae, 16 years old, found in Busan during the 4th year of the pause, under the rubble of a shopping mall, next to the body of a woman who had shielded her with her own body. The woman was dead before she was frozen. Min-jae was alive. Barely. Do-yeon carried her 17 kilometers to the nearest point where his equipment was set up. She was the first of 42,000. He looked at her face through the glass of the capsule. Asleep. Peaceful. She didn't know the world had ended. She didn't know that something new had begun. She didn't know that the man standing before her capsule had spent 100 years gathering people like her from the ruins of a frozen world. Do-yeon placed his palm on the glass. Soon. Then he straightened up, stepped back, pulled a ring from under his shirt, looked at it. He remembered Eun-hae's face. He remembered Ji-hoon's face. He remembered how the crowd had laughed. 42 days until the tournament. And the order wasn't sitting idly by. Do-yeon knew that. On the 3rd day after the thaw, Cardinal Ryu activated the shaping protocol. Choi Ji-hoon was taken from the front lines and transferred to an accelerated growth capsule, an S-class system artifact. The energy of 1,000 demonic cores was pumped into his body 24 hours a day. D rank, E rank, C rank, B rank. They planned to bring Ji-hoon up to A rank in 2 weeks. Resonance 184,000, and to hand him the weapon that the Order had been forging for 200 years in case of an anomaly, the Usurper's Sword, an artifact specifically created to neutralize the Sovereign category. Do-yeon knew about the sword. He had found the blueprints in the 47th year of the pause in the Order's underground vault in the Vatican. He studied them. He figured out the principle. He found the weakness. And he waited. 42 days. Do-yeon turned to Min-jae's capsule. He said quietly, "Wait a little longer. I'm almost done." Then he went up to the 1st level, sat down at the terminal, opened the file he'd been keeping since the 89th year of the pause. Operation Glass, a 73-point plan. He crossed out points 1 through 12. Completed. He looked at number 13. Defrost Hyun-soo. Do-yeon stood up and went to the 7th level.
Jung Hyun-soo opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was the face of a 23-year-old guy. Then he saw the gray concrete ceiling, then his own hands. Then he remembered the fire. The building was burning, the third floor. A girl in his arms, a jump out the window. Darkness, and now this ceiling. Hyun-soo twitched. He tried to stand up. His body wouldn't obey him. His muscles felt like wet cotton. Do-yeon placed his hand on Hyun-soo's chest and told him he was safe, that the girl was alive, that a long time had passed. Hyun-soo asked how long. Do-yeon answered, 100 years. Hyun-soo stared at him for 4 seconds. Then he said that wasn't funny. Do-yeon said he wasn't joking. The thawing process took 16 hours. Do-yeon had developed a safe awakening protocol in the 78th year of the hiatus. 22 years of experiments on cell cultures, on tissues, on organs he extracted from dead bodies in the morgues of frozen hospitals. Not a single experiment on living subjects. He waited until the protocol showed 0 mortality across 10,000 consecutive simulations. Only then did he thaw the first one. Hyun-soo. Because Hyun-soo was a soldier. Because if something went wrong, a soldier would handle it better than a 16-year-old girl. Nothing went wrong. Hyun-soo lay on a medical couch in Arcadia's 7th level module and listened. Do-yeon spoke for 3 hours. Without pauses, without emotion, facts, the apocalypse, the system, classes, ranks, pause, 100 years, demons, cores, Arcadia, children, the order, Ji-hoon, Yoon-hae, the ring. Hyun-soo listened and didn't interrupt. He was a special forces soldier. He knew how to listen to a briefing. When Do-yeon finished, Hyun-soo asked 3 questions. First, the girl from the fire, where is she? Do-yeon replied that she was in a cryo chamber nearby. Alive. She's healthy. She can be thawed at any moment. Second, how many people do we have? Do-yeon answered, 2, you and me, plus 42,000 in cryosleep, plus an AI named Shihi. Third, who are we fighting against? Do-yeon looked at him. For the first time during the entire conversation, something alive flashed in his eyes. He answered, against everyone who decided that humans are a crop. Hyun-soo sat down. His muscles trembled but held firm. He looked at his panel. Class, Guardian, rank, D, resonance, 980. Then he looked at Do-yeon's panel. Sovereign, R17,412,880. Hyun-soo blinked. He looked again. The number hadn't changed. He said, all right, what do I need to do? Do-yeon gave him 24 hours to recover. Hyun-soo demanded 12 hours. He took 8. 8 hours later, he was standing on the 4th level training ground, holding a weapon he had never seen before. A resonance rifle. A prototype that Do-yeon had assembled in the 63rd year of the hiatus. Conventional firearms were useless against C-rank demons and higher. The resonance rifle used miniature demonic cores as ammunition. Each shot carried a resonance charge of 500 to 2,000 units, depending on the core's caliber, enough to pierce the defenses of a C-rank demon. Hyun-soo had been shooting for 4 hours. His accuracy with the first magazine was better than Do-yeon's after a month of training. A Special Forces soldier is a Special Forces soldier. Do-yeon looked at the stats and nodded. Then he opened the Operation Glass file. He crossed out item 13. He wrote next to it, Hyun-soo is ready. The 4th day after the thaw, the Order's information war was gaining momentum. Do-yeon was intercepting broadcasts via a satellite channel. 142 media outlets were broadcasting the same narrative. Sovereign is a demon disguised as a human. The destruction of the first wave was a planned provocation. The second wave was caused by Sovereign himself. Evidence? None. But the repetition worked. By the 4th day, polls showed that 43% of the population believed Sovereign posed a threat. 31% considered him a savior, 26% were undecided. Do-yeon looked at the numbers and said to Si-hee, 43%. Good. Si-hee asked why it was good. Do-yeon replied, because when I step into the arena and show the ring, 4 billion people will be watching, and 43% of them will be expecting me to turn out to be a monster. But I'll turn out to be a guy whose heart was broken. Trust. Trust works better than the truth. Day 5. Do-yeon thawed out So Min-jae. The procedure took 14 hours. Min-jae opened her eyes and screamed, not from pain, from fear. The last thing she remembered was the crash of the collapsing ceiling and her mother's body on top of her. Do-yeon sat beside her, waiting. When her scream turned to crying, he told her she was safe, that her mother had saved her life, that time had passed. Min-jae asked how long. He answered, 100 years. She didn't say it wasn't funny. She looked at his face, at his eyes, and believed him immediately, unreservedly, because in the eyes of the 23-year-old guy in front of her were so many years that no one her age could have faked it. Min-jae didn't ask tactical questions. She asked one. You've been alone all this time? Do-yeon remained silent. That was his answer. Min-jae stood up from the couch. Her legs gave out. She fell. Do-yeon caught her. She grabbed his sleeve and wouldn't let go for 20 minutes. He stood there, holding a 16-year-old girl who clung to his arm as if it were the only real thing in the world. And he didn't pull his arm away. For the first time in 100 years, someone had touched him, and he felt warmth. Not the warmth of frozen matter, the warmth of a living person. Si-hee was silent. She knew that in moments like this, even a tactical coordinator had to remain silent. 3 days later, Min-jae was walking. 5 days later, she was running. A week later, she knew Arcadia better than Hyun-soo. She wandered through the levels, touched the walls, read books in the library. She didn't ask why the world had become this way. She accepted it as a given. For her, there was no world before the apocalypse. There was only this one, with the underground city, with 42,000 sleeping children, with the man who had spent 100 years gathering them from the ruins. Do-yeon gave her a task, cameras. Min-jae had to become the face of Arcadia, not Do-yeon, not Hyun-soo, a 16-year-old girl, an orphan, saved, alive. When the Order calls Do-yeon a demon, the world needs to see not weapons, not satellites, not the residents of 17 million. The world needed to see a child who looked at the sovereign and saw not a monster, but a human being who had carried her 17 kilometers through a dead city. Min-jae agreed, not because she understood the strategy, because he asked. Do-yeon crossed out item 14 from Operation Glass. He looked at the next one. Item 15. Prepare Yoon-hae. He closed the file. This item required not action but waiting. Yoon-hae would come on her own. The Order would bring her. They think she is their weapon. They don't know that she is his. Do-yeon thought out Hyun-soo, who had mastered the resonance rifle in 8 hours. He thought out So Min-jae, who became the first living person to touch him in 100 years. Min-jae has been designated as Arcadia's face for the counter-narrative against the Order. The information war is gaining momentum. Do-yeon expects the Order to send Eun-hae to him on its own. On the 20th day after her thawing, So Eun-hae entered Arcadia's field of view with the sword of St. Kara in her hand and new eyes. Not figuratively. Her eyes were golden. The iris, the pupil, everything was golden. A system upgrade to the Saint class. Rank B. Resonance 38,000. 3 weeks ago, she was rank D with a resonance of 1,200. The Order had leveled her up just like they did with Ji-hoon. Faster, harsher, because they were preparing the usurper's sword for Ji-hoon, and for Eun-hae, they were preparing something worse. Memory overwrite. Si-hye spotted her on the outer perimeter 14 kilometers away. Do-yeon stared at the screen. Eun-hye was walking alone along a mountain trail, unescorted, without support. The sword of holy punishment glowed white in her right hand. Her face was blank, not angry, not determined, blank. The face of a person whose memories had been erased and replaced with a directive. Si-hye pulled up the data. Eun-hye's resonance signature contained foreign frequencies, 3 layers. The first layer, combat performance enhancement, standard. The second layer, suppression of emotional response, non-standard. The third layer, target acquisition. Eun-hye was not heading for Arcadia. She was heading for Do-yeon, specifically for him. Her body was locked onto his resonance frequency like a missile on a heat signature. Do-yeon said, forming protocol, version for the saints. Si-hye confirmed. Hyun-soo stood nearby. His hand rested on the resonance rifle. He asked what to do. Do-yeon replied, nothing. Hyun-soo looked at him. Do-yeon repeated, nothing. I'll go out alone. Hyun-soo said it was a bad idea. Do-yeon said it was the only one a bad idea. Do-yeon said it was the only idea. He went up to the surface through the north exit. Eun-hye was 3 kilometers away. He saw a white dot of light between the trees. The light of the Sword of Holy Kara, a Class A artifact. Weapon resonance, 95,000.
Plus the wielder's resonance, 38,000. Total combat power, 133,000 units against 17,412,880. It wasn't even funny. But Do-yeon wasn't going to fight. He was going to lose. Eun-hye stepped out into the clearing. She saw him. Her golden eyes focused, her body tensed, her sword rose. She didn't recognize him. The memory overwrite had erased Han Do-yeon's face from her consciousness. To her, a demon stood before her, an anomaly, a threat the system had ordered to be destroyed. She attacked. Quickly, B rank granted a speed D rank heroes had never seen. The sword traced an arc of white flame. Do-yeon stepped aside, not quickly, deliberately slowly. The blade passed 10 centimeters from his face. He felt the heat, hot, but not hotter than the latte on his wrist 100 years ago. Eun-hye spun around, a second strike, a third, a fourth, a series of 12 strikes in 6 seconds, each capable of cleaving a C-rank demon in 2. Do-yeon dodged every one, by millimeters, without blocking, without counterattacking, just moving, like a person walking through a park and stepping around the trees. Eun-hye stopped. She was breathing heavily. Her golden eyes flickered. The sword trembled in her hand. She didn't understand. The target isn't attacking. The target isn't defending. The target is just standing there. Do-yeon looked at her, at the golden eyes that once held brown pupils, at the face he remembered from when she was 22, at the hands that once held his palm. He slowly raised his hand to his neck. He pulled out a chain. On the chain was a ring, a silver one, with a small stone. The very one. 100 years of polishing. Every evening, every day. The metal shone like new. No, better than new. The ring of the man she had remembered for 100 years. Eun-hye looked at the ring. Her eyes flickered. The gold turned brown for a second. 1 second. The sword dropped 3 centimeters. Her lips twitched, and she uttered the name she didn't remember. Do-yeon. 1 second. Then the gold returned. Her eyes went blank again. The sword rose, but that second had passed, and Si-hye's camera had recorded every frame. Eun-hye attacked again. This time, Do-yeon didn't dodge. He stood his ground, and the sword of Holy Kara struck his left shoulder. A white flame seared his skin. Blood. Real blood. A sovereign could take damage from a Class A artifact if they didn't resist. Do-yeon didn't resist. Blood trickled down his arm. Eun-hye froze. She stared at the blood. Red. Human. Demons don't bleed red.
The directive in her head said the target was a demon. Her eyes told her the target was bleeding human blood. Conflict. Do-yeon said, "Eun-hye, you spent 3 hours choosing this ring. At the store in Myeongdong, you said silver was better than gold because gold is too flashy. You said the stone should be small because we aren't rich and there's no need to pretend." The golden eyes flashed again. 2 seconds. The ring, Myeongdong. Silver is better than gold, a small stone. Images that the rewriting hadn't erased because they weren't in her memory. They were in her body, in the muscles of her fingers that had spent 3 hours sorting through the rings in the display case, in the nerve endings that remembered the cold of the silver. Eun-hye lowered her sword. The gold in her eyes trembled. She didn't attack. She didn't retreat. She stood between the directive and the ring. Do-yeon said, "Go home." To them. Tell them the mission is complete, that you wounded me.
Show them the blood on the sword. And come to the tournament. Sit next to Cardinal Ryu, and when I step into the arena, look at the ring. Eun-hye stood there for 30 seconds. Then she turned and walked away. The white light of the sword receded between the trees. Do-yeon stood in the clearing with blood on his shoulder and watched her go. Si-hye said in the earpiece, "The wound is superficial. Regeneration will take 4 minutes." Do-yeon replied. "I know," Si-hye said. "You let her hit you on purpose," Do-yeon replied. "She needed to see that I'm human. Humans get hit and they bleed. Demons get hit and they crumble." Si-hye paused and said, "You took a risk. If the sword had hit her neck instead of her shoulder, a Class A artifact could have..." Do-yeon cut her off. "It couldn't. I know every one of her strikes. I've watched her training records in the Order's database. 8,000 hours of footage. She always strikes the left shoulder first. Always." Si-hye fell silent for a long time. Then she said quietly, "You're a terrifying person, Do-yeon." Do-yeon didn't answer. He stared at the blood on his hand. His own blood. The first in 100 years. Even the pain felt like a gift. Eun-hye attacked Do-yeon with her rewritten memories and the sword of holy punishment. Do-yeon showed her the ring and breached the rewriting for a single second. He deliberately allowed himself to be wounded to prove he was human. He sent Eun-hye back to the Order with instructions to attend the tournament. Si-hye recorded the moment of the memory breach. 43rd day after defrosting. Cho Ji-hoon emerged from the accelerated growth capsule, and his first breath burned his lungs. Resonance 184,000. A rank. 6 weeks ago, he was D rank with a resonance of 1,840. His body had grown by 8 kilograms of pure muscle mass. His reflexes had accelerated 40-fold. His system interface displayed skills he had never studied. Holy Blade Technique, Resonance Shield, Spatial Step. The Order had uploaded them directly into his neural pathways via the capsule. Not training, installation, like programs into a computer. Ji-hoon stood before the mirror in the Order's underground hall and did not recognize himself. The face was the same, but the eyes were different, deeper, darker. 40 days of continuous bodily restructuring leave their mark. Cardinal Liu stood behind him. S rank. Resonance 340,000. An old man who was 72 on paper, but 304 according to system privileges. He placed his hand on Ji-hoon's shoulder and said he was proud. That Ji-hoon was the best hero in the last 100 years. That in 2 days in the arena, he would show the world that humanity didn't need a sovereign. That the hero would handle it. Then the cardinal handed him the usurper's sword. A black blade, 120 centimeters long. A blade made of a material not found on the periodic table. An artifact forged 200 years ago in case a sovereign class anomaly appeared. How it works. Resonance rupture. The sword did not cut flesh. It cut resonance. Upon contact with the target, the blade severed the resonant bonds between the core and the body. It didn't matter what the target's resonance was, 10,000 or 10 million. The sword cut the connection itself.
Theoretically, a single strike would be enough to neutralize the sovereign. Theoretically. Do-yeon found the sword's blueprints in the 47th year of the pause. He studied them for 4 years, and he found a design flaw that the creators had failed to notice in 200 years.
The usurper's sword operated through a resonance rupture, but the rupture required contact, physical contact. The blade had to touch the target, and Sovereign's resonance pressure prevented objects with low resonance from getting close, the same effect that crushed the C-rank demon in Kanem. Ji-hoon, with a resonance of 184,000, would not be able to get closer than 3 meters to Do-yeon, who has a resonance of 174,412,880. And the sword is 120 centimeters long. Mathematics. The Order didn't know this because in the sword's 200 years of existence, there hadn't been a single sovereign to test it. The 6 previous malfunctions had been destroyed before reaching this category. Do-yeon was the first to make it to the end, and the first to read the blueprints of their own weapon. Day 44, the eve of the tournament. Seoul was buzzing. The 80,000-seat Olympic Stadium was packed to capacity. Tickets were not sold. The system allocated seats by rank. The front rows for saints and heroes, the middle rows for military personnel and officials, the upper tiers for civilians with the highest resonance. The remaining 7.5 billion watched the broadcast. Do-yeon was getting ready in Arcadia. The preparation took 20 minutes. He took a shower, put on clean jeans, a white t-shirt, sneakers, hummed the ring on a chain around his neck, took a cup of latte. He looked at Hyun-soo. Hyun-soo was standing in full Arcadia tactical gear, a resonance rifle on his back, 4 projectiles in his pouches. Do-yeon said that Hyun-soo would remain in Arcadia, protecting the children. If something goes wrong in the arena, the Order might try to strike the underground city. Hyun-soo is the only one who can prevent that. Hyun-soo nodded. Then he said, "Come back." Do-yeon looked at him. Hyun-soo repeated, "Come back. 42,000 children are waiting." Do-yeon replied, "I'll come back." Then he turned to Min-ji. She was standing at the entrance to the cryo section, small, skinny, with eyes that had seen too much for a 16-year-old. Do-yeon said that in 6 hours, she would have to go out in front of the cameras. Si-hee would give the signal. Min-ji just had to be herself. Stand in front of the cameras and tell the truth. That Sovereign had found her under the rubble. That he'd carried her 17 kilometers. That there were 42,000 like her in Arcadia. Min-ji nodded. Then she walked over and hugged him. Briefly, tightly. She let go. Do-yeon left Arcadia through the main entrance. For the first time. Before that, he had only used secret exits. The main entrance opened in the mountainside like a gaping mouth. Concrete and steel. The lights of the runways. Airlock chambers. The scale of a military base. No, the scale of a nation. He walked down the runway alone, a cup in his hand, a ring around his neck. Ahead lay Seoul. Ahead lay the arena. Ahead lay Ji-hoon, with a black sword and an A rank he hadn't had 45 days ago. Ahead lay Eun-hye, in the stands next to the cardinal. Ahead lay 4 billion eyes. Do-yeon walked, thinking about what Si-hye had said to him an hour ago. She asked, "Are you afraid?" He replied, "No." She said, "You're lying." He replied, "Yes, I am afraid. Not of Ji-hoon, not of the sword, not of the Order. I'm afraid that when I slip the ring onto his finger, I won't feel a thing. That 100 years of waiting have burned everything away. That the moment I've replayed in my head for 36,000 nights in a row will turn out to be empty." Si-hye said, "What if it doesn't?" Do-yeon remained silent, because that was what he feared even more. Ji-hoon emerged from the capsule with an A rank and the usurper's sword. Do-yeon knew about the sword's design flaw discovered 53 years before the battle. He prepared for the arena in jeans and a t-shirt, holding a cup of latte.
Hyun-soo stayed behind to guard Arcadia. Min-jae was tasked with stepping out to the cameras after the signal. The Olympic Stadium roared. 80,000 voices, 4 billion behind the screens. The Heroes Tournament arena was a circle 200 meters in diameter, covered in white sand. System projectors broadcast the fighters' panels onto giant screens above the stadium. Retired General Kwon Chi-soo, the commentator, listed Chae Ji-hoon's achievements: Hero of Seoul, Defender of Gangnam, Slayer of 300 second-wave demons, A rank, Resonance 184,000, Bearer of the legendary Usurper's Sword. Ji-hoon entered the arena in full hero's regalia: white armor with gold trim, a cloak bearing the emblem of the Order of Ascension, the Usurper's Sword in his right hand. The black blade absorbed the light around it. The crowd rose to its feet. Applause, shouts,
Chants of his name. In the VIP box, Cardinal Liu Wei-jin sat in a black wooden chair. S rank, Resonance 340,000. His face was expressionless. Next to him was So Eun-hae, B rank, Resonance 38,000. Golden eyes, the sword of Holy Kara on her lap. On her left shoulder, a scar that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. A bite mark. Not demonic. Human. She had bitten herself. Every night after returning from Arcadia, her rewritten memory fought against the body that remembered the ring. The announcer introduced the second contestant, an unidentified contender. No class, no rank, no track record. Silence. Entrance to the arena from the east side. No one. 5 seconds. 10. The crowd began to whisper. And then he came out. A guy in jeans and a white t-shirt. Sneakers. No weapons, no armor, no cloak. A cup of latte in his left hand. A young face. 23 years old. Eyes that looked older. 123. He walked across the white sand of the arena, and his footsteps were the only sound in the stadium of 80,000 people. The system panel unfolded above his head. The screens showed a close-up. Han Do-yeon, Sovereign Class, Resonance 17,412,880. The stadium fell silent. The number glowed blue on screens the size of 5-story buildings. 17,412,880. Next to it, on the adjacent screen, was Ji-hoon's panel. 184,000, a difference of 94 times. Commentator General Kwon opened his mouth and closed it. Opened it again, closed it. In the command bunker beneath the stadium, General Park Sung-ho stared at the monitors. His hand gripped the armrest of his chair. The microphone was on. He whispered, "This isn't a human. It's a category we don't have." His voice went on the air again. Millions heard him again. Do-yeon stopped in the center of the arena. He set the cup down on the sand. He stood up straight. He looked at Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon stood 20 meters away, the Usurper's sword in his hand. White armor, a golden cloak, handsome, heroic. On the screen, his panel displayed A rank, and the crowd remembered how he'd slain demons in Canum. But now, his hand was trembling. The sword was shaking, because Ji-hoon saw the number, 17,412,880, and he remembered. He remembered the square in front of the university. He remembered the guy with a latte in his hand. He remembered saying that he wasn't even a player. He remembered how the crowd laughed. Do-yeon spoke. His voice was quiet, but the system broadcast every word to the entire stadium and to every screen in the world. Ji-hoon, do you remember what you told me exactly 100 years, 3 months, and 11 days ago? Ji-hoon didn't answer. His jaw was clenched so tight that the muscles on his cheekbones turned white. Do-yeon continued. You said I wasn't even a player. Pause. Silence. 80,000 people held their breath. Do-yeon said,
You were right. I'm not a player. Players play by the rules, but I've been writing my own for 100 years. Ji-hoon attacked. The usurper's sword sliced through the air. The black blade traced an arc that would have cut an S-rank demon in half. A spatial step hurled Ji-hoon forward 20 meters in a split second. The blade flew toward Do-yeon's neck. 3 meters. Ji-hoon stopped. Not of his own volition. Resonant pressure. 17,412,880 against 184,000. His body froze in midair. His feet tore away from the sand. His sword-wielding hands froze mid-swing. He hung 3 meters from Do-yeon. The usurper's sword, 120 centimeters long, fell short of its target by 180 centimeters. Do-yeon raised his index finger.
Ji-hoon hung higher. The cameras showed a close-up. Seoul's hero, A-rank, bearer of the usurper's sword. He hung in the air like a puppet. 10 seconds. The commentator was silent. Cardinal Ryu rose from his throne. For the first time in 30 years, his face had changed. Not fear, not anger. Understanding. The realization that 200 years of preparation had been in vain. Do-yeon lowered his finger. Ji-hoon collapsed onto the sand, to his knees. Not from the blow, from the pressure. Resonant pressure pressed him to the ground. His hands unclenched. The usurper's sword fell onto the sand. The blade touched the surface and began to crack. Black metal not found on the periodic table. 200 years of forging. Thousands of demonic cores at its core. It cracked from a single touch with the sand, Sovereign's resonance. Cracks spread across the blade. The sword split into 3 pieces. Eun-hye in the stands clutched her chest. Her golden eyes flashed. She sensed something. She didn't remember what, but she sensed it. A pulse throbbed in her neck, 140 beats per minute. Her body remembered what her mind did not. Do-yeon approached Ji-hoon. He leaned down. He picked up the latte cup. Slowly. 4 billion people watched as the guy in the white t-shirt took a silver ring out of the paper cup. A small stone. Silver is better than gold because gold is too loud. He took Ji-hoon's hand, the left one. He spread his fingers. He slipped the ring onto his ring finger. The cameras showed a close-up. The ring on the hero's finger. Do-yeon said, "A gift. Wear it. She picked it out for you." Ji-hoon looked at the ring on his hand, and he remembered. The square, the latte, the cup, splashes on his wrist. Eun-hye takes off the ring, throws it. He puts his hand on her lower back. The car with the golden cross. He remembered and realized he was kneeling before the guy he had betrayed, the guy he had been ordered to betray, the guy who, over 100 years, had become something the Order's orders couldn't stop. Do-yeon straightened up. He turned toward the stands. He looked at Cardinal Ryu, straight into his eyes, 50 meters away. He smiled. Then he looked at Eun-hye. She was staring at the ring on Ji-hoon's finger. Her golden eyes were wet. The gold was flowing. Beneath it, a square pattern emerged. Do-yeon turned away. He walked toward the arena exit. The stadium stood in silence. Then someone stood up. Then a second. Then 1,000. Then 80,000. Half in horror, half in ecstasy. All of humanity was in shock. Do-yeon didn't turn around. He walked toward the exit, and a light flared in the sky behind him. Arcadia. Do-yeon activated the outer shell of the underground city. Reflective panels brought to the surface of the mountain caught the sunlight and redirected it. Arcadia shone on the horizon like a second moon. The whole world saw it. This is what I can offer, and this is what I won't offer until you've earned it. At that moment, Shihei gave the signal, and So Min-jae stepped out in front of the cameras at the foot of Mount Gangwon. A 16-year-old girl, an orphan,
rescued from the rubble, alive. She said one sentence to the camera. He carried me 17 kilometers. 4 billion viewers heard it. Do-yeon entered the tournament arena to face Ji-hoon. He stopped him in midair with a single finger. The usurper's sword split in two. Do-yeon slipped a ring onto Ji-hoon's finger. In-hae in the stands began to break through the broadcast interference. Arcadia shone on the horizon.
Min-jae stepped up to the cameras and said that Do-yeon had carried her 17 kilometers. Cardinal Liu Wai-jin left the stadium through an underground tunnel while the crowd was still standing. 12 hierarchs of the order followed him. 11. Hierarch Chen remained in the stands. He sat and looked at the broken sword of the usurper in the sand of the arena, at the ring on Ji-hoon's finger, at the light of Arcadia on the horizon. The first open act of defiance in the order in 200 years. The Cardinal did not turn around. He knew that Chen would not return. He knew that others would follow Chen. He knew that every hour the sovereign remained at large cost the order a century of legitimacy. In the order's underground hall, the Cardinal sat down in a chair and closed his eyes. He thought for 14 minutes. Then he opened his eyes and gave the order. The Harvest Protocol. 11 hierarchs froze. The Harvest Protocol had never been activated in the entire history of the order. This was the final stage of escalation. The opening of the reserve fissures. Fissures that the system had kept sealed for the final phase of the apocalypse. Fissures from which neither D-rank nor C-rank demons would emerge. Demon princes would emerge from the reserve fissures, dozens of them, and the order would announce that Sovereign had opened the fissures. Hierarch Khan asked about civilian casualties. The Cardinal replied, acceptable. Hierarch Khan asked about the scale. The Cardinal replied, global. Hierarch Khan bowed his head. The Harvest Protocol was activated 2 hours after the tournament ended. 16 reserve fissures opened simultaneously on 4 continents: North America, Europe, Asia, Africa. 3 to 7 demonic princes emerged from each. A total of 72 princes, S rank, resonance ranging from 280,000 to 410,000 each, plus their retinues, thousands of B and C rank demons. The world that had been captivated by the scene in the arena just 2 hours ago was plunged into chaos. Cities were burning, defense lines were collapsing, heroes and saints rushed into battle and died by the dozens. The A-rank heroes, of whom there were 11 worldwide 6 weeks after the apocalypse, could not handle a single prince on their own. 72 princes simultaneously meant the end. The order issued a statement an hour after the fissures opened. Sovereign had destabilized the system's balance. His presence had triggered a counter-reaction. The reserve fissures were a consequence of his anomalous resonance. The 43% who believed Do-yeon was a threat rose to 58. The 26 undecided dropped to 15. The 31% of Sovereign supporters fell to 27. Do-yeon sat in Arcadia and stared at the numbers. He updated the data every 10 seconds. Losses, go kind, approval ratings. Hyun-soo stood nearby. His fists were clenched. Min-jae sat on the floor and cried. Not because she was afraid, because cities were burning and people were dying on the screens. Do-yeon stood up. He looked at Hyun-soo. He said, "The plan hasn't changed." Hyun-soo asked, "You knew they would do this." Do-yeon replied, "The Harvest Protocol, Paragraph 9, the Order's Charter, Activation Conditions, the emergence of an uncontrollable sovereign-class anomaly, and the failure of suppression protocols levels 1 through 6. I read that charter in the 23rd year of the pause." Hyun-soo said, "You could have prevented it." Do-yeon looked at him with that look. 123 years, he said. If I had closed the rifts before the world saw who opened them, the order would have remained pure. But I need the world to see whose hands are stained with blood." Hyun-soo turned away. His jaw moved. He wanted to say something. He didn't, because he understood. Do-yeon continued. "Sihae, the Aurora package. Carry out the order." Sihae replied. "I will." The Aurora package. 37 communication satellites that Do-yeon had reprogrammed during the decades-long hiatus, but hadn't included in Erebus. They weren't weapons. They were cameras. Each satellite was aimed at one of the 16 faults. Each one broadcast the same image live to every screen on the planet. The fissures were not being opened from the outside. They were being opened from the inside. And at the base of every fissure, a system marker with an emblem stood, a golden cross against the backdrop of a rising sun. The Order of Ascension. The fissures were opened by the Order, not the Sovereign, not the system, not the demons. The Order, with its own markers, with its own codes, with its own hands. Do-yeon showed this to 4 billion people. No commentary, no accusations, just cameras, just markers, just a golden cross on every fault. Cardinal Liu saw the broadcast and his face did not change. He was too old to show panic, but his hands trembled. For the first time in 300 years. The hierarchs began to leave the hall, one by one. 7 of the 11 remaining, gone, silently, without goodbyes. 4 remained, 4 out of 12. The order was crumbling live on air, and the cardinal knew this was no accident. It had been planned by the man who had read their charter 77 years ago. Do-yeon left Arcadia, alone, in jeans and a t-shirt, without the cup. The cup remained in the arena. It was no longer needed. 72 princes across 4 continents. Do-yeon closed the first rift in Busan in 90 seconds. The prince with a resonance of 310,000 didn't even have time to turn his head. The resonance pressure crushed him like a paper cup. The second rift in Osaka, 2 princes, 3 minutes. The third in Shanghai, 4 princes, 7 minutes. He moved across the planet with Arcadia as his coordination point. Shihi plotted the routes. Hyun-soo relayed data on civilian zones from the command center. Min-jae stood in front of the cameras and commented on the events for 4 billion viewers. Not as a propagandist, as a 16-year-old girl describing what she saw on the screens. He's heading to the next rift. He won't stop, he promised. 20 hours. Do-yeon sealed all 16 faults, 72 princes destroyed, 0 casualties on the sovereign side. His resonance, after processing the prince's cores, had been updated. Are 19,200,000. The panel flashed. The number blazed across the world's screens. The approval ratings flipped. 27% of supporters became 64. 58% of opponents became 22. The order had lost more than just its legitimacy. The order had lost its meaning. Cardinal Liu stood in an empty underground hall. 4 hierarchs, empty chairs, 200 years of history. He knelt before the black altar at the back of the hall, an altar that not even the hierarchs had seen, an altar to which the cardinal came once every 10 years to receive instructions. The surface of the altar came to life. The black stone became a screen. A system panel appeared on it, but not an ordinary one, not blue, black, with symbols not found on the resonance scale. Architect, Cycle 7. The malfunction has awakened ahead of schedule, initializing the Reaper. The cardinal read the lines, and his 300-year-old face aged before his eyes. He knew what the Reaper was. He knew that the previous 6 Reapers had destroyed everything that remained of the malfunctions. Cities,
armies, civilizations. The 6 previous cycles had ended the same way. The Reaper came. The Reaper reaped the harvest. The Reaper left. Humanity started over, without memory, without history, without a chance. A figure rose from beneath the altar. Humanoid. Height 5 feet 9 inches. Average build. Average face. Human. Female. Age around 45. Black hair with gray at the temples. Warm eyes. Wrinkles at the corners of her mouth from the habit of smiling. The face of Han Soo-hyun, Do-yeon's mother. The panel above the Reaper's head showed no resonance. Instead of a number, there was a symbol the system did not recognize. Category above sovereign. Cardinal Ryu took a step back. For the first time in 300 years, he felt something he hadn't felt since the day of the assignment. A primal, animalistic terror of a creature standing before a predator of a different order. The Reaper turned to him, smiled, with the warm smile of a mother waiting for her son to return from a walk, and spoke in the voice of Han Soo-hyun, that very same voice that Do-yeon had recorded in Sihye 34 years ago to keep from going mad. The voice that spoke the same words to him every night in his sleep. Son, stop playing. Come home. The cardinal fell to his knees. The 4 remaining hierarchs fell after him. Not out of loyalty, from the pressure that knew no bounds. The Reaper emerged from the underground hall. He climbed the stairs. He opened the door to the surface. Soul lay before him, burning, shattered, alive. The Reaper breathed in the air, his first breath in 7 cycles, 7 iterations, 7 farms, 7 harvests, and for the first time, a single anomaly had survived until harvest with an army in the underground city and a number on the panel that exceeded all previous failures combined. On the other side of Seoul, Do-yeon stood on the roof of a building. He looked toward the Order's underground temple. He could not see the Reaper, the distance, buildings, smoke. But he could feel it, a resonance that defied measurement, a pressure that made the air tremble 20 kilometers away. Sihye spoke into his earpiece. Do-yeon, my sensors are detecting an anomalous resonance spike in Sector 7. Source unknown, magnitude unknown. My scales aren't designed for this. She fell silent. Do-yeon waited. Sihye continued. My scales aren't designed for this value. I can't measure it. I have no number for it. Do-yeon was silent. The wind ruffled his white t-shirt. The chain around his neck was empty. The ring remained on Ji-hoon's finger. The cup remained in the arena. 100 years of preparation for the first act were over. The second act was beginning right now. And in the second act, the enemy had no number on the panel. Do-yeon said, Sihye, you hear that voice? Sihye replied, What voice? Do-yeon said, This one, from Sector 7. Silence. Then Sihye said, Yes, detecting a sound wave, a woman's voice, frequency analysis, a 99.97% match with my voice database. Do-yeon, that's my voice! It's Han Soo-hyun's voice! Do-yeon stood on the roof and looked at the horizon. His face didn't move. His eyes didn't blink. His hands didn't tremble. Inside him, 100 years of loneliness, silence, pain, and preparation had condensed into a single point, into a single thought. The one who wrote the system stole his mother's face. And that thought was the last drop in the cup he had been carrying for 100 years. Do-yeon said, Shihe. New target. Category, Reaper. Absolute priority. Shihe replied, Acknowledged. Do-yeon turned and walked down, to Arcadia, to Hyunsu, to Minjae, to 42,000 children. To the second act of a war in which the stakes are no longer his honor or his vengeance. The stakes are a farm of 7 billion souls. and the one who runs the farm has just revealed his face. Cardinal Ryu activated the Harvest Protocol. Through satellites, Do-yeon showed the world that the Order had opened the fissures. He closed all 16 fissures and destroyed the 72 princes. The residents rose to 19,200,000. The Order has collapsed. The architect has initialized the Reaper in a body bearing the face of Do-yeon's mother. Category: Above Sovereign. Resonance is immeasurable. Do-yeon has declared the Reaper the new target of absolute priority.